Jai Shri Ram, everybody. I wanted to talk about something that I would call the overabundance of civilizational pride that I hear from a lot of people on our side. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can it be possible to have too much pride in our civilization? Because this is one of the things that we kind of always stress, that we want to be very proud of our religion, our heritage, our culture, and that we see that the opponents, who are, also Indian, also from a Hindu background, but politically and ideologically opposed to us, they tend to be very ashamed of Hinduism and Indian culture and where they come from. So I think we all have this kind of knee-jerk reaction to say, well, being proud in who you are and being proud in your civilization is good, and I absolutely agree that it is a good thing. But I would say that it's a good thing to be a starting point. Once you have that kind of foundation, you're firm in your identity, you're firm in your pride, then you have to build upon that something that is more substantive. And what I see from a lot of people on our site instead of that, especially among people here in the West, is they have this kind of fantasy that everything about India and Hindus and Hindu society is great and perfect, and the only thing that we really need to do is rid ourselves of the cultural effects of the British and the cultural effects of the Muslims. So if we can basically anglicize and de-Islamize our culture, then we're going to be living in this kind of idyllic utopian Ram Rajya kind of state. And I think that when you look at Indian history and Indian life in general in the village, what you find is that's really not the case at all. We had a very, very fragmented society that was only united under certain kingdoms at certain points of time. You can think about the Marathas, you can think about the Vijayanagara Empire, you can think about the Guptas, the Mauryas. You can think about this handful of different dynasties that ruled over large swaths of the subcontinent. But outside of those time periods, we were extremely disunited, right? I think we would all know about the fact that when the British came to power in India, they did that by pitting, certain Indian kingdoms against others. They had inimical relationships with some. They had allied relationships with some. They had relationships of being vassals, vassalage with others. And not only that in terms of the kind of geopolitics, but also even in the armies that they led with, white British generals, the enlisted men of those armies were overwhelmingly Indians that just felt like, this is a good job opportunity and this is a way to better myself and my family, right? So this sense of kind of a lack of clarity on the unity of who we are is very deeply ingrained in our society, I think. And so having pride in the unity of our culture and the civilization is great. It's definitely the first step to overcoming all these massive divisions that we have. But it's only the first step because, again, when we are talking about Hindutva, when we're talking about building this pan Hindu kind of identity, we have to really come to terms with the fact that this is a fairly new concept as far as something that trickles down to average people, in the sense that average people were much more accustomed to thinking of themselves as members of a particular jati, living in their particular, village, ruled by their particular panchayat, and all of these kinds of things, right? So to get people thinking on this more pan-Hindu level, we absolutely need this sense of, stressing the pride of heritage, the cultural unity, and all those kinds of things. But in order to move forward, and that is, I think, what we all want to do, right? None of us are really advocating that we need to go back to some kind of village based feudal kind of economy and a heavily stratified kind of society, or or even beyond stratification, these kinds of ideas of, Varna is not inborn, because Krishna says in the Gita it's by your temperament and character and all those kinds of things. I think as far as serious people go, we're trying to do things that are in the 21st century we're looking back for values, for principles, for identity, but we're not really looking back for actual plans of how we want to move forward. Which brings me to my broader point, which is that once you get people to be proud, once you get them on our side, we then need to also look at what are the flaws that we have and how do we fix them. Because here's the thing, there is a difference between the kind of thing that you would say to an outsider and the kind of thing that you would say to your fellow Hindu. So I mentioned caste a couple times, so I'll give that as an example again. We do hear from certain people on our side that have this idea that, well, caste is, comes from a Portuguese word, which etymologically is true. And, this is a conflation of jati and varna, and it used to be that varna was, not inborn, meaning it was something of your own temperament. It wasn't something you were just born into. The jati was the birth-based system, and it was the British that conflated these two things, and all of this kind of stuff, right? Now, I think the main issue with this kind of ideology is it doesn't admit the fact that there were so many kind of native Indian influences and reasons for which this kind of system existed and really discriminated against a significant portion of society. And also, just as important as that, those people felt discriminated against also. And so when they had an opportunity that, in their very limited understanding, they thought they could better themselves, for example, converting to Christianity, they took it. And so you see that, there are a significant number of Dalits who have converted to Christianity because they were promised various things like job opportunities, money, land, so on and so forth. And the overwhelming majority of the time that doesn't happen. And so then, now they feel like they have disconnected from Hinduism, and they also didn't get what they want when they kind of entered into this bargain and so on and so forth. And these are kinds of people that, if you put Garwapsi towards them, many of them do take it up, and you have seen a lot of success when Garwapsi has been attempted on these types of people, right? But my point is that the reason that they had converted to Christianity in the first place is because they had experienced all of this kind of lack of social mobility and discrimination and all these other kinds of things from people who are also Hindu. Because again, you have these deeply solidified caste identities, which a pan Hindu identity would work to kind of surpass, right? And so, in talking about caste, I think this kind of idea, going back to what I said about talking to outsiders and talking to fellow Hindus in different ways, I think if, Christians or people of other religions ask Hindus about the caste system, we should absolutely reply with the whole idea of, caste is not an Indian concept. We have jati and varna. Varna is, not birth based. It's by your character and all of this kind of stuff to give them this explanation as to why our religion is not inherently oppressive, right? But when we're talking to our fellow Hindus, we have to admit that we do have these problems that we are being criticized for. And those people that are being problematized see it that way too, which is why you see such a, again with the politics angle, you see so much support for Dalit politics. You look in the past with Kanchiram in UP, Mayawati in UP. You're looking at this person, Chandrasekhar Azad Rawan, as he calls himself today, and the Bhim Army, and all of this kind of stuff. You're seeing significant portions of the Dalit population taking hold of these figures and really backing them, right? Because these people feel marginalized. And as Hindus, what we have to really focus on is, as far as this one issue is, how are we going to make these people feel as if their identity of Hindu is being Hindus trumps their identity of being Dalits or being part of any particular jati? And I wanted to end on this. We do have an example of this from recent politics. If you've followed Indian politics in the past few years, or you're from the state of Gujarat, You may remember an individual called Hardik Patel who was agitating for reservations for his community. The Patels, I believe they're called Patidars, the actual name of the caste. Now, Patels are generally a very strongly BJP voting base in the state of Gujarat. In that particular election, he's contested it as on the Congress Party's ticket, and he ended up losing. Why? Because even though a substantial portion of the Patels did back him and vote for him, the BJP by that point in 2015 or whatever year it was, a couple years ago, they had basically consolidated enough votes from various Hindu communities that they could withstand this kind of contestation from one of their constituent groups. Now, how did that happen? Part of it is because of, Achedin and all of this kind of economic progress that's happened. Part of it is because of the fact that Hindutva is something that appeals to Hindus no matter what region they're from, what caste they're from, what language they speak. It is a broad based, pan India, pan Hindu kind of ideology that doesn't discriminate against anybody and ideally makes them all feel included. And three, you also had increasing urbanization that played the part of more and more people are moving to cities. Of course, as people move into cities, they're less connected with the village and less connected with the social stratification and kind of social structure that exists in the village, and people are able to make more of an independent life for themselves, right? So you had several different factors playing in, some of which are directly in the control of politics, and some of which are not. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe.